Hey guys, I'm Anand Chimpy from AnandTech.com. This is our first. This is something we've never done before. This is the AnandTech Mobile Show. I'm joined by the ever awesome Brian Klug, our senior smartphone editor.
Hey guys.
So you're used to us doing this in podcast format. Canonically, I guess this would be episode 20 something, but this is number one in terms of the mobile show. So there's like a whole bunch of stuff that we have been kind of putting off talking about because we thought we might be able to do this here. We're live from IDF 2013. We're Moscone West, second floor. There's like a whole bunch of stuff going on here. And there's just a bunch of stuff that we haven't updated you on. So I just want to dive into it. Yeah, it has been a while. So we'll go a little bit out of order.
Yeah.
You and I flew in on Monday.
That's right.
Right? We flew in on Monday. I rented a car, grabbed him from the airport, and then we drove straight to Intel in Santa Clara. And we just started working on Bay Trail. So the way it worked is Intel brought us in. They had some slides going on about the current state of Android benchmarking. It's something we've often complained about.
Yeah, I think the whole industry identifies this problem now.
Exactly. It's kind of frustrating, right? Because we've been saying this a lot. A lot of the companies, they'll all do their little spiel about how much we hate Android benchmarking, but there's no good solution, and we're not the people that need to be talked to about it.
I feel like we spent a lot of time and effort explaining that problem, and I guess it's good that everybody's getting a redundant education about it, but it is kind of like the problem needs to be solved by the people that can solve the problem. Rather than us, because we can't write the benchmarks necessarily and get everybody to agree on them. But everybody has to do their little thing.
So we did that, and then they took us on a tour of their experience labs.
Testing lab.
So they had this crazy robotic arm that they send commands to, and that's how they simulate user experience on tablets and phones and stuff like that. They've got an insane red camera videotaping it all. And then they just do all this analysis on it, and that's how they determine whether or not a device, how they quantify whether or not a device has a good user experience.
That was cool to see, because I think a lot of companies also still struggle with how do we codify what is the performance of this device versus the other device, what tuning do we have?
What we normally see is you can get a great SunSpider score and then just drop frames everywhere.
Right.
Because they are orthogonal, right? Those two things have nothing to do
very
with
much. And it's a larger extension of the problem that they kind of pitch. Which is that the benchmarking isn't tracking well with user experience and user performance. So we need to resort to these things that sort of interact with the display and emulate a user. And it's cool to see. I mean, they've shown it before, but I had never seen it in person, and it's good to see that somebody's actually doing that testing.
Well, it's kind of interesting the way it works, right? They went out and they did all these focus groups first, just to get an idea for what people thought was a good experience versus a bad experience. And they tabulate all this data, they've got all this stuff. Then they kind of derive mathematical models from all of it, right? So they don't have to keep surveying the same people, do you like this tablet or do you not? So they take all that data, and then they have this kind of robotic arm plus camera setup to simulate usage. And then based on what the camera sees, they map it to that original data. And that's how they can say, on a tablet that comes out next year, whether or not that original focus group of people, and that group gets updated regularly, whether or not they would have thought this is a good experience. So it's kind of a neat idea, but the thing we challenge them on is, it's great you guys get this, but can you get the OEMs in here to also do it? Because that seems to be the weak link.
I think coming up with a MOS like that, and it's an empirical MOS that they have, is great.
Mean opinion
score. It's great, but at the same time, you really do need to make sure you're getting actual user studies and actual stuff done. And predicting is one thing. It's whether it's actionable data, is going to be something else. And I think it's great for them to make their own performance predictions, but it's I'm not really convinced yet that it's at the point where an OEM is going to turn around and say, okay, we're going to go back and fix this. They don't have you said this as well, they need a bigger carrot or a bigger stick.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the OEM angle is always difficult, right? Because it's a lot of them are still learning.
They're the customer, but you also want to make sure that,
they're representing the platform properly. Well, what's intriguing to me is if you look at how microprocessors were designed for so long, you would take spec, you would take these workloads, and you would use them to determine, how big your caches were, what your predictors look like, all that kind of stuff. And this is the first time where it's you have all of that and also humans. Right?
Yeah.
These these groups of people that you surveyed and you've gotten information about, they are now kind of influencing the way chip architecture looks going forward.
Right.
So that's kind of mind-blowing and different.
And it's nerve-wracking, and they've kind of explained it, but are they naive users?
Yeah.
Are they also, do they perceive the same things we do?
Yeah.
Because we sort of know what to look for when, like, are you dropping a frame? Are you janking?
Yeah.
Is the touch interaction smooth? The things that sort of enthusiasts use to gauge performance versus things that people can't really
They don't know how to explain,
they don't know how to
right?
explain. So, I mean, obviously there's great statistical backing there, but obviously benchmarks aren't going away.
Yeah. It's just that, so anyways, we did that, right? And then they shuffled us on to a bunch of other stuff, and then they were like, here's a really, really cold room.
Yeah.
Go in here, and there was like a litany of Bay Trail tablets. And you grabbed the Android one.
Yes.
I was stuck doing the Windows stuff.
Yep. We sort of divided up that way.
Yeah.
And there was one running Android 4.2.2 and then Windows 8 point something.
Yeah.
And the room was freezing, but so obviously the devices aren't going to throttle, which is good. But I mean, I like the format, and I like the idea that they give us the same sort of access that Qualcomm does now.
Yeah.
Obviously, Nvidia's starting to do the same thing.
Yep.
It's interesting to see all these players sort of moving towards that model where they're going to bring us in to look at the reference design and sort of gauge that performance.
Yeah.
And then, we get to have something to hold the OEMs accountable with.
Yes.
When the devices come back and maybe they don't meet that performance level, maybe they're not, up to spec in terms of the thermals.
Yeah.
So I like that idea, and I'm glad that Intel is doing it.
That's cool. So what was your, so on the Windows side, it was really interesting to me because I'm kind of stuck in this weird place in Windows today where, do you compare to like all the legacy notebooks?
Yeah.
Right? And
Right.
what we saw with how Bay Trail performed, like we tested the highest end SKU.
Right.
But it's like a $37 chip, and it was delivering performance that was kind of in the class of like a 2010 11-inch MacBook Air. Right? So that's, on one hand, that's really cool. And then on the other hand, there's also like this Windows tablet market, right?
Yeah.
Which, isn't that developed right now. It's not, like my comparison points over there just aren't very good, right? They're kind of forgotten platforms. And it did really, really well there.
Obviously, the lines are merging everywhere, and it's kind of the same thing that even the data that we're gathering, it's kind of, we have this discussion internally about, does it go under tablet, does it go under phone?
Yeah.
And now, we have devices that kind of straddle the line between a tablet and a phone, like the phone pad, for example.
Yeah.
Is that a tablet or is it a phone? What do I compare it to? And like, how do I minimize the yelling when, you're making comparisons against a tablet, but it's also a phone? And it's interesting to see that desktop and notebook and that sort of clamshell market is moving the same way, where really it's sort of a part that competes against notebooks from a couple years ago, but it's also going to go in these other platforms where it's really going to be in like a phablet, or it could even move down to a phone. Who knows?
Well, so there are a couple points that I respond to there, right? Like there's this idea that phone and tablet are all that dissimilar.
Yes.
If you look at the power, we're talking about the same like
I think
1
they're
to
the
2
same.
watt range there for a lot of like normal work.
Right.
Now every now and then you have like the insanity, right, where it'll be like a 10 watt part in there.
Or 12 watt.
Yeah.
Or just like
but for the most part, like I'm just constantly shocked. Like when we did the Nexus 7 stuff and I measured power on that and I was comparing it to phones, and we're in the same realm of power consumption.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it's a phone part. I mean, the thing that differentiates for me is really the thermals.
Yeah.
And of course you see these parts, everybody's up against a thermal wall, it's just a reality.
Yeah.
And so that's a big difference that often, I mean, this as well, but often everybody comes back to and points to, and like you just have a bigger thermal mass that's going to heat up slower. And so is it really fair? You see them throttle faster, but otherwise I agree, it's the same part. Ultimately it's the same silicon,
and
it's
they
just chopped down
do,
different
even
ways.
with the thermal differences, they tend to actually behave very, very similarly.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But so that was, I think for me, at least on the Windows side, that was my big takeaway with Bay Trail, in that the performance, I mean, obviously we
the
just
lines
got
are
done.
so blurred, even you know what to do subconsciously, right?
Yeah, well, there's that, but like I just got done testing Ivy Bridge E, right? So
that's
there's
one
nothing,
extreme.
But nothing Bay Trail's going to do is going to be like, oh, this is really fast. But what kind of blew me away was the performance it was delivering at the like power draw it was delivering, right? Because I had them hook up like adjacent to the room we were doing all this testing in. They had like all of these tablets power instrumented. So I said, hey, can I get power consumption on the test that I'm running? They're like, yeah, sure. So like I walk over and just fire up Cinebench, and you're talking about like 2.5 watts.
Plus,
yeah, they had all that stuff. But
if
if you look at what was going on, you were getting like 2.5 watts SoC power running like multi-threaded Cinebench at the same performance levels of like a 17 watt part from a couple years ago.
It is crazy, yeah.
That was kind of insane, right? So that was the big thing for me. It wasn't absolute performance, but it was perf per watt that kind of blew me away on the Windows side. What about on Android? What did you...
I mean, obviously they didn't show the Android side documented with power, but I mean, it's the same platform, so you don't really need to see it. I think on Android, it's interesting that the reality is that the port is kind of lagging behind.
Yes.
So the emphasis is still Windows.
Yes.
And obviously that makes sense for Intel because they want to really leverage the fact that they're running Windows and they can do both.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that they showed it running Android, to be honest. And obviously, I have no doubt that their bring up is going to be the same quality as it was with.
Well, so that was the kind of interesting thing in that, like, you and I were physically testing the same hardware.
Yeah, it's the same box. Yeah.
There was not his tablet was identical to mine. It's just it had a different OS load,
right?
Which has a lot of really interesting implications for manufacturing these things,
right?
Right. Whereas in the past, you had here's your Android line.
I think that economy of scale is really going to kick into play and maybe will be a big value add for Intel.
And
if they can do it the right way through their OEMs.
Exactly. Well, not only just Intel, but the OEMs too, right?
Yeah.
Like having that flexibility where they can now, for the first time, they really have two viable OSs that they can ship on anything. And if you can do it on one unified platform.
I mean, I'm totally sold on that.
Yeah.
I think for some applications, Android is still the canonical best thing to have.
Yep.
Obviously, like there's lines that are starting to blur between the two. It's great that it's not RT. I mean, obviously they don't have to deal with that. Obviously, in the ARM space, they're kind of figuring that out. They could have done the same thing, with OEMs that have a common platform that's sort of ported.
Yeah.
But I feel like it is more difficult there, and Intel makes it a little bit easier with their drivers and their BSP. But I'm pleased with the Android performance. There were things with Dalvik, which we mentioned in the review, that it's not dispatching the threads right now. But I mean, they know these issues. They know that performance and UI in some places wasn't where it should be.
Yeah.
But obviously in the tests it was great.
All the CPU performance looked good. All the CPU performance looked good.
I really always go back to Medfield because I spent so much time with the Lava Phone, the Zolo.
Yeah.
X900, I believe it was, in the Orange San Diego, and now Razer Eye.
Yeah.
And there's really no issue to speak of. Even in the very earliest time that I had those devices.
Yeah.
You really couldn't tell unless you looked for it that you were on x86.
Yes.
Which is really the big takeaway. At least it was then, and I think it still is now, and they kind of keep playing that up.
Well, so for me, that was the, can you use Android on x86 and have a decent experience?
Right.
I think that answered that, and then the question moved on to me, well, okay, can this modern, can this become a more modern platform?
Right.
Because if you look at when Medfield hit, it was really good at its time, right? On the CPU side and not good on the GPU side. And then you go forward and everything just got faster and Medfield stayed the same. So then you get to Bay Trail and CPU performance, it's like you hit the reset button and boom, they're at the top now.
Yeah.
And you look at GPU performance and it's not at the bottom, it's not in the middle, but it's not at the very top. It's like kind of upper top middle area, right?
Yeah, I think the GPU for us is a big thing that we're trying to push.
Yeah. Especially
because, now in Android and obviously Windows from the beginning, there's GPU acceleration of 2D primitives, of the 2D UI. So this is going to it's going to continue being a big thing, and the 2D rendering pipeline isn't going to go away.
Yeah.
So having faster GPU directly translates to improved UI performance.
And that's what I said in the article too. I was like, I want, Intel has established leadership on the CPU side, looks really, really good on power, at least competitive, right? We haven't done the competitive analysis, but we're talking 1 to 2 watts, 1 to 2.5 watts, and a lot of heavy CPU workloads. I think that's fine. But I want to see that same leadership on the GPU side, right? Because that's ultimately what pushes the industry forward.
And imagination is gone.
Yeah. That's the other big thing, right? Like the evac of imagination technologies and moving into Gen 7 graphics. I was actually kind of surprised.
And they showed that doing video too, which seemed to. Yeah, I mean, those are the big questions for me, especially because some, that's obviously the track going forwards is something similar, and it looked competitive, the stuff that I saw.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we got to wait for final hardware, then we can do our own kind of power level comparisons.
Got to compare to 8974 too.
Absolutely, Snapdragon 800. Yeah. It's we have our work cut out for ourselves, but I thought it was a good event. I thought it was a good start.
Yeah.
Now, so we did that on day 0. And then day
that was
1,
a whole day too. It wasn't 10 minutes.
No, that was we kept people late, right? Everyone had left Intel, and then it was us and people waiting to eat.
Yeah,
and then they were just kind of when are you guys going to leave?
I like the anechoic chamber too. They seem to be wanting to do audio testing and that sort of thing. But it's just a cool excuse to step into an anechoic chamber.
So
or
we did that.
Hemi-anechoic.
We did that on day 0, and then you and I drove to Cupertino
Yep.
the next day, and we did the Apple event.
Yeah, that morning, bright and early.
And then what was your? So that was your first. That was both of our first experience at Town Hall, right? Normally they do it like out here in like a huge venue.
Yeah, normally it's like right across the street, essentially.
What are your thoughts? Like, so I did appreciate that it was more intimate. Like when Tim Cook gets on stage, like I don't actually need to hear him on a mic. I
guess they renovated that space too. That's what somebody was saying. Is that it's
interesting.
different and it's ready now, and they're going to use that more.
Oh, interesting.
I think the performance.
And we both ate apple omelets. Like I think that's important.
That's critical. Yeah, very critical. Food selection is always something you need to comment on. But I thought the event went well. They kind of stick to the same formula that they always do. Obviously, Tim Cook, is well rehearsed in the ways of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And started giving that update and then continuing on. I think the iPhone announcements are great to have standing on their own, and I'm glad they did that, because if obviously there's the October event, and if you throw too many things in at once, then it's kind of like it's lost in the noise. And like last time they had the iPods.
Yeah.
This time I feel like iPhone and 2 iPhones is enough on its own.
Yeah.
And I don't know. My thoughts about the iPhone are still kind of like solidifying to some extent. And it's always difficult because when you're there, it's different from if you're like at 10,000 feet and you can see the broad picture.
Absolutely.
Like you would be if you were sitting at home.
Yeah.
Obviously, like S refreshes are getting more difficult for Apple to really sell, because they've indirectly kind of, put forth this narrative that specs don't matter, which, I mean, our position on that is that it's just laughable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're obviously pushing the boundaries with things like 64-bit, OpenGLES 3.0.
We left, and I remember, a year ago, right, we're here, we left Yerba Buena, and both you and I were like, hey, that's kind of an amazing announcement, right? And it was, we went contrary to what a lot of people believe, because it was amazing to us since they, built their own CPU architecture, did all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of blew us away. And I remember leaving Town Hall and thinking, I just want to understand the chip architecture, right? Like that's what
the big thing.
That's what I'm drawn to here.
I think that's the real magic of the S updates. Although I kind of expected more on the connectivity side, to be honest. Even if some of it isn't really possible, like you can argue back and forth about.
So what do you want? You want LTE advanced, and you wanted 802.11ac.
Well, I was expecting the new modem. I think there's stuff back and forth about whether the new modem is ready or not.
Yeah.
Carrier aggregation is going to be here in the next, couple months.
Yeah.
6 months.
So take people through, like, what is carrier aggregation and why does that matter?
So in the United States, you can't have 20 megahertz. Nobody really has 20 megahertz of continuous spectrum, which is what the maximum single channel bandwidth for LTE is. And that enables 150 megabits if you have a Category 4 modem. At present, everything is Category 3, except for 8974, which is just coming out, which is limited to 100 megabits. So in order to realize the 150 megabit speeds, you need this 20 megahertz that really only Verizon has on band 4.
Okay.
So to do this, like AT&T and Verizon in most markets and everybody else that doesn't have that sort of contiguous spectrum is going to do aggregation of just basically 2 10 megahertz slices of spectrum.
Yeah. So if you have 2 different bands, you physically own enough spectrum. It's just it's not just in one band.
It's not contiguous and in a nice place, and they can be on different bands. They can be in the same band somewhere. Okay. There are combinations that are published that 3GPP has approved. Okay. And essentially, the cool thing about the new modem is that you can do these. Yeah. And I mean, they're on AT&T's roadmap. They're on Verizon's roadmap. Yeah. And they're coming.
But so a lot of end users, if you look at LTE performance today, a lot of end users never get close to like 100, much less 150. So what's the real world impact?
The thing is that it's not total throughput, because obviously you're never going to realize those. Yeah. It's that using that capacity efficiently is the same problem. And again, the race to faster really means lower power. Okay. Because it's not in the short term your workload and your duty cycle isn't going to just go up all of a sudden. Yeah. Which, again, is a philosophical argument, but empirically it just doesn't happen like that. So really you get lower power. This is like the AC thing. Like, why do I need 433 megabits in a phone?
I got you. So that's the other half of the argument, right? You don't have LTE, and you'd like that for better spectral efficiency and better just power efficiency.
And plus, it's an S update. I mean, you got to have something. Yeah.
But then, so the same reason, that's why, because I was actually thinking about this internally. I was thinking, I like that 802.11ac. It's on the One. It's on the Galaxy
Yeah,
S4.
it's ubiquitous. It's on the Moto X.
It's never something that I benefit from directly in terms of peak throughput. But there's the power efficiency argument.
Sure.
And is that the main thing you're looking for?
That is one of the big things. Yeah, and obviously using more spectrum on 5 gigahertz, these wider channels. It's all sort of the same problem, really. And I don't think there aren't any power disadvantages with going 4335 versus 4334 that I'm aware of. So I really think it's just kind of a volume play. Like if they can share that same part, that same inventory between the 5C and the 5S, that's kind of we can make the argument for getting better pricing that way.
Yeah.
And same with obviously the modem stack is shared between the two.
Yeah.
Which they've said publicly. Then really that becomes the same thing, and it's both lower cost to both support from the software side, which is like sort of a cost that nobody really factors in. They just look at what's the price of one discrete part versus what's the cost for maintaining it. So I mean, Apple has kind of been putting that forward. They want to maintain just one software stack for the modem, one software stack for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and so obviously this is sort of the result of that. You know, is that making it more economical. Unfortunately, means that like you're either gonna have to bring a more expensive product into the lower end, or a less expensive, maybe not flagship device into the high end.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you really see here, to be honest.
So thoughts on the 5C? Like as we're talking about volume and cost and all this, you played around with both of them quite a bit.
Yeah.
What did you think about the 5C?
I think it feels great. Obviously, the build quality is awesome.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going to come back and say, well, it's a plastic phone. How can it possibly feel awesome?
Yeah. Because you've been a huge proponent of like I need metal.
I still want all metal. Obviously, Apple still doesn't have all metal. They have very close. The thing is that how do you maintain your rigidity while still having this plastic material, or a polymer, if we're going to use the buzzword, that's a little bit less. It has fewer things attached to it
than plastic.
Plastic. So I think it's all in the feel, how you deliver it. They have like the same metal structure inside.
Yeah.
So that really helps with the rigidity and making it feel solid. It has the same dimensions. I like the edge bevels.
Yeah. It does feel like really comfortable. Okay, sorry about that. Apparently we had wireless transmitter die, battery life. It's like it's always an issue with
Everybody
us.
suffers from battery life issues.
So we were talking about iPhone 5 feeling very tall.
Yes, yeah.
And
they need to move into different size factors, but I feel like they know that. It's just too soon. They can't.
It's clear. Like they have this cadence of you have new chassis, keep it around for 2 generations, and then new chassis. So I think the prime time to do a larger display is next gen, right?
Yeah, me too. I think the other thing is that iOS is kind of stuck with these different scalings. It's the real question is will the development ecosystem change to support interpolation?
Yeah.
Will they stick to these scalings? Will rather than going at 2x, will they do something else?
Yeah, they have to.
Do you scale up and then just call the iPhone, like at this larger size, still Retina-ish?
Yeah.
And
well, so I appreciate the results of the 2x resolution scaling.
Yeah,
because
me too.
It means we get insane GPUs and just they just have to throw more hardware at the problem, which I think is really cool.
Well, and I can't see the pixels. I mean, it really does make a substantial difference. At least to me. I don't know.
So do you think next gen maybe they do a larger display?
I think they have to.
With that, the scaling. So we also recently got another, or not that recent, we got another device.
Yeah, it's been a while, but we haven't talked about it.
Yeah. So Moto X, both of us got one.
Yep.
And
I think we have 3 all total now.
Yeah.
Because there's the black one and Motorola did an awesome job by sampling really early.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, most companies don't really do like Intel. We're kind of spoiled on the PC side, right? Because we'll get something a month early.
Well, I'm really jealous of that because obviously they want sound testing. They want people to come back, and review the device well, not necessarily like give it a good review, but really do a good job, exploring it.
Whereas normally for you, it's like someone throws a phone at you, and then it's like the NDA
I have
for 2
like
days.
a week of which half is eaten up by battery life testing.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, well, you don't really get to enjoy the device or like use it and fit it into your daily schedule and see where, what functions you're going to use really.
Yeah.
It's kind of I need to just go explore everything really fast.
Yeah.
And artificially, come up with what I think is going to stick and what won't.
Well, I find with old devices, there's like that one point where it kind of clicks.
Yeah.
And like I just get what the point is and what they try to do.
It took longer with Moto X because we're going to talk about it, but the X8 system sort of was an initial turnoff, or at least the way it was presented to us and marketed.
Well, because
and
there's
the
like
8-core
there's
thing.
20 years of how you reference microprocessor cores, right? CPU
Yeah.
cores, how you deal with it. And then anytime someone, for purely marketing purposes,
Yes.
comes up and says, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
My initial, I do your little hands up thing. And
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really, I was kind of surprised because I had been told, rather early that they were going to go this way.
Yeah.
And my first reaction was, oh God, no, like, please can we not do this? Because like it makes our job harder.
Yeah.
Because then, I mean, we're in a gigahertz race, but we're also in a core race.
It's a core counting race, because it's not
Yeah.
even like a real core race, right?
Right, it's like things you can point out that are cores. So
Yeah.
then, like I wrote in the thing, at what point are we going to start counting like DSP cores as
Yeah,
cores?
exactly, because
And-
there are a bunch of those.
Yeah, and so I said like it could be 10 cores really
Yeah.
in the Moto X. In some of these other phones, it could be like 12. I mean, NVIDIA, they could be in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, what does it really mean? It
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. It's sort of a
So
more
that
is
initial
better.
thing turned us both off, right?
It really turned me off. Yeah.
But then we get the devices, and I know my initial reaction was I was like, actually, this is an amazing like size for
Yeah.
my hand. I looked at, I like the HTC One a lot, right? But compared to that, the HTC One and the Galaxy S4, the Moto X was like the perfect size for me.
Right.
Now I don't have the
Yeah, me
world's
too.
biggest hands.
I like the bigger devices, but I think this one fits really well.
Yeah.
And obviously, the customization option is novel.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the greatest thing in the world, but it does add something to, the Motorola lineup that nobody else really has.
Yeah.
And sort of the interesting thing for me is that Google said their approach to designing the device was to sort of go into a user study,
Yeah.
find what the right size of device is,
Yeah.
collect feedback, and then fit the device within those constraints. And I've always kind of wanted to see an OEM do something like that,
Yeah.
or
Instead of
study
just
it
like
myself.
arbitrarily saying, well, we need something bigger or smaller. And obviously
Yeah, the
that's not how it
engineering
works.
process works the other way, and this is like top down. Usually, it's bottom up.
Yeah.
And
It's these are the specs we need to have. How can we build?
yeah,
a
we need
device?
this display.
Yeah.
We've got all this stuff. We have this much area.
Yeah.
Fill the rest with battery.
Yeah.
And what you get is what you get. Whereas this is kind of like, well, we need a screen size that's this big, maybe.
Yeah.
We want to go as big as we can, probably.
Yeah.
And then you need to fit the shape around it. Around this, what we found is the best shape.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, you have to give them respect where respect is due, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the right way to do things. It feels great. Obviously, the dual core part of it, I think after a while it kind of clicked when you were like, well, because of the thermal reasons, it kind of stays in the higher CPU states
Yeah.
longer anyways.
Yep.
So maybe this really isn't actually stupid.
Yeah,
maybe it makes sense.
It's the only silly part about it isn't that it has 2 cores versus 4.
Yeah.
Is the amount of voltage you need to hit those higher frequencies.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
problem, right? If we were all having
So
a
maybe an
rational
8960 Pro at HPM.
Yeah, right? Like if we were having a rational discussion about, look, we're only going to run at these frequencies at these voltages versus like
Right.
overboosting to get there,
Yeah.
then I think then it would be a no trade-offs kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that when I looked at the scores they were getting on 3D Mark, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why is this so high?
Yeah.
And then we just ran Treppin on it and saw that it's just like
Yeah.
the CPU core is just running way faster
Yes.
right now.
Yeah.
And so it kind of clicked, and I almost don't care that it's only a dual core at that point.
Yeah, right.
I care that
I miss
they're
it
just,
sometimes, but yeah, it's not very often. I miss
Yeah.
more the fact that it's not 1080p.
Do you? So I'm actually.
I just don't like AMOLED. I mean, you know where I stand
Okay.
on that.
No, so but separate the two, right?
Yeah.
Like if it were an LCD 720p.
It would look like the One Mini, and I like the One Mini in that size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the resolution I'm not totally bothered by, and you said it yourself. You're like technically this is like
Yeah,
Retina class
technically
or
you can't
whatever.
see it. I just don't like AMOLED, and it seems
Yeah.
like there is something I can't really codify that I can see the pixels more in their domain.
Interesting.
I think they have more black area around it.
Yeah.
Or something. The space fill isn't there. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I mean, obviously to say nothing of the saturation. Which
Yeah.
On the Moto X, it's kind of like, did they even try? I mean, the charts are like it's just it's like off scale high.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like the device overall. I think it's great. I mean, I recommended it to people already.
Yeah. No, I like the device a lot, and I like that it comes with like a mostly stock Android experience.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it's not fully stocked, but I mean, that's probably the most positive thing to come out of the whole Google Motorola transition.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously the Moto X is important to them too because this is literally, I mean, it's all in the name, right? It's Moto X. This is
Yeah.
literally with a phone that's relaunching that company
Yeah.
under Google leadership.
No, I came away surprisingly positive on it, right?
Yeah.
My biggest issue with the Moto X is that I feel like in 6 to 8 months, I'm going to feel like it's old, right?
Yeah, that's
That
the thing
it's-
is, well, it already kind of feels old. We have 8974 phones
Yeah.
right now. And that's sort of the problem. Is it's not like, do the specs matter right now? Because right now it's just one slice in time.
Yeah.
Do they matter over this long integration of, the year or 2 years if you're going to stick to your contract, that you're sort of sitting with this thing? And meanwhile, this ecosystem is moving so fast.
Yeah.
Are you going to really get left behind if you buy something like this right now?
Yeah.
Where already it's not a flagship. And obviously the pricing is the other thing for me, is that
Yes.
it's kind of like, it is a high end but it's not premium level SoC.
Yeah.
And a device that's being sold at that sort of premium level cost.
Absolutely.
And
then
one
there's
of the
also the camera
commenters-
stuff too, right?
Yeah. It's really the unfortunate part of the Moto X is that I feel like the BOM is probably really high.
Yeah.
Because they spend a lot of money on camera. They spend a lot of money on the ISP. They spend a lot. They tick the right boxes, at least for the things that are around the SoC. But the result is like it sort of costs too much.
Yeah.
And
Like
it's
at
sort of-
99, it would be
it'd
an
be
amazing
perfect.
thing.
Yeah, and I hope they go there fast. The rumors are they're going to go there fast.
Yeah.
There was one comment to that review that really stuck out at me, and it was like, there's no such thing as a bad product, just bad pricing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's hilarious because literally, I remember through the years,
It's like
someone
the 5C
doing
is the same
that,
deal.
someone doing that comment, right? I remember
Yeah.
seeing that in around Larrabee. I remember seeing that around like some of our old GPU stuff.
Yeah.
And I
I
wonder
mean,
if it's
it's
the same
true.
commenter. Like that's just
He's
always
just like, he
frustrating.
always drops in as like, yeah, there's
Just
like,
wisdom.
this isn't a bad device, it's just wrong price.
Yeah.
I mean, you can argue, is the 5C too expensive? I mean, like, it makes sense now that it's going to take the slot of
Yeah.
the 5. But I mean, that seems to be like a recurring theme right now, is that things are coming in at these price points that, maybe they're trying to build the margin back up.
Yeah.
Maybe, there's some ulterior motive. I just feel like the Moto X will move down really aggressively.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of like maybe it needed to start high to have that flagship, that halo aura.
Yeah, it's always frustrating to me because I think you said it in the review that if it came down in price, it would be almost disruptive in the
I
marketplace.
think it would be, yeah.
And I agree with that. And the frustrating part is if you launch that way, then you
Yeah.
launch to universally like awesome reviews.
Right.
Whereas if
yeah.
you launch high and like have to discount it, no one's going to go back and re-review
Yeah.
that thing, right? You have that. That's like a snapshot in time
Sure.
that they've lost the kind of opportunity to really capitalize on there.
Well, then you can speculate too. Is that they don't want to anger their partners that are also delivering Android phones.
That's true.
And that whole part of the Motorola equation, that's sort of like there's a firewall in between. There's still Nexus.
Yeah.
And we saw the Nexus leaks,
Yeah.
which basically the FCC confirmed for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on internal to Google that we don't really have visibility into.
Yeah.
And what the long-term Motorola play is. Obviously, wasn't just the Motorola X.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that device is interesting.
Yeah.
If nothing else, because again, it's stock. It has these features that I sort of like. I mean, you like.
Yeah.
I think they track well with normal people.
I really like the camera gesture. Like that,
yeah.
I'm kind of addicted to that. I want to do this on.
Although it takes pictures in my pocket all the time.
Which is like you and I must like walk differently because like I don't have.
My gait is apparently just perfectly matched to the camera gesture. Because literally, I pull it out of my pocket and there's like, it's the camera's on. So you're like, did I put it in my pocket with the camera on?
Yeah.
And then you go into the gallery and you just see pictures of your pocket, which are always really surreal because there's just like black and like random stuff, you
Yeah.
know? It just looks really strange. So, and those are two big features that they sort of highlighted,
Yeah.
the active display and the camera activation thing. And I mean, obviously there are going to be false positives,
Yeah.
but for me at least, that's kind of it's a big detractor, but
Yeah.
I realize not everybody's going to identify the same problem.
So we have time to talk about real briefly one last thing.
Yeah.
So I went to New York and I checked out Galaxy Note 3, Galaxy Gear, and then the Galaxy Tab or the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition.
Yep.
I feel like the most
Say
interesting
that fast
yeah.
3 times, yeah.
I feel like the most interesting out of all of those, at least the most topical one, is
Yeah.
obviously Galaxy Gear.
Yeah.
Now I
Because
haven't worn a watch
Qualcomm
in a long
launched
time.
the talk at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Or announced it, I guess.
And then you have Pebble.
yeah,
as well.
I've been wearing Pebble daily since I got it, basically.
Yeah. And you have glass as well.
Yeah, I do. Although I'm not wearing glass, obviously, right now. I actually didn't bring it because sometimes it's hard to pack it.
Yeah.
It doesn't fold up. But it's obviously wearables are becoming a big thing right now. We even see Intel trying to move towards that.
Yeah.
With Quark.
And I think it's interesting as a device maker, we highlighted this in our article on the Gear. The reason this is happening now is because everyone who's kind of at the top of their game as they see smartphones moving towards like a more mature market, right, where you're not going to have this insane growth, obviously their shareholders, their investors, them as a company, they want to see that continued growth.
Right.
So it's really like, what can we do next, right? That's going to have that same curve so we can keep riding this wave. And I think
Yeah.
wearables is an obvious fit, right? You leverage all the cell phone technology.
Yes.
And you already know how to do low power, and then you just put it on something that goes on your face or
Right.
neck or arm or whatever.
I mean, this obviously that market has a long history.
Yes.
Going like back to the watch that ran Palm that the Meta Watch guy is now running.
Yeah.
So, I think it's interesting to see this. The point that you made that I really liked, and I think it's interesting to see it play out right now, is that both times when we kind of reached what we thought was saturation,
Yeah.
this became the thing that everybody
Yep.
was going to go to sort of keep the momentum going
Yeah.
forwards. And I think it's indicative that we're in that part of the cycle now.
Yep.
Which
Well,
is kind of like part of my theory about like, are we nearing the end game or not?
So the thing is, if you go back to the last time everyone tried to do wearables,
Yeah.
right? So Samsung literally had a watch that looked like the Galaxy Gear.
Yeah,
right?
I like that.
You
yeah.
know, from whatever 2008, 2009. They were in that same kind of period where they're like, look, we want to keep growing the mobile business.
Sure.
And what ended up happening was there was a giant reset
Right.
on the
Yeah.
entire mobile industry.
Yeah.
So the question is, does
What's
that
the
happen
reset?
again?
Yeah.
Or is this really like, does mobility just turn into what the PC industry was in, let's say, early 2000s,
Yeah.
and now it's just maturity and perfection?
I think it's too hard to say. Obviously, you never know what's going to come next.
Yeah.
I believe personally that there is starting to be like a plateau effect. There is always that question of where on the S curve really are you?
Yeah.
I would say obviously it's indicative again that we're having wearables be a big discussion as a growth market, a growth vector that's sort of symptomatic of it. I don't know if it's really the canonical cause.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's fascinating that we're going to get watches that kind of live up to the expectation
Yeah.
that the previous set,
just
sort of
couldn't.
Yeah, they couldn't deliver. I feel like the power, the process,
Yeah.
the understanding, the smartphone experience is really there to deliver it.
Is there
my
a
thoughts
wearable
about
that-
Galaxy Gear notwithstanding?
Yeah.
It's sort of looking like this is going to become another segment.
Yeah.
And my thoughts about Pebble are that it's sort of the earliest acceptable platform that you can really use.
Yeah.
When I got it, it was very early on. A lot of functions weren't fleshed out. I've seen UI changes. It's sort of settled down now.
Yeah.
I think Qualcomm Talk looks interesting, if nothing else, because of the Mirrorsaw display.
Yeah.
Even though I have some preconceived notions about Galaxy Gear, I still want to play with it.
Yeah.
I think battery life is the real concern there.
Absolutely.
Obviously, when you're below 24 hours, it's hard to sell.
A watch.
Yeah, and I think you can even make the argument maybe it isn't a watch. Do you need to be over
because
a
they
day?
never actually even call it a watch, right?
Yeah,
In
I
none
think
of
it's
their
connected
literature-
accessory.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's what it is. It's like it's a smartphone extension that just happens to live on your arm.
Right.
And I think that's where some of this is really interesting in that, everyone is flocking towards the things that we know, right?
Yeah.
The watch, the glasses.
But there's something else.
Yeah, we don't have to be confined by that. Anyways, I know we're running out of time. This is like a super short episode, but we got to run to another meeting. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and to the folks here that came by to watch, thank you guys as well. And thanks to Intel Mobile and Intel Studios for giving us the space and like putting together this insane production so we can do this. So we'll talk to you guys real soon.
Thanks.